from Matthew 5:13. Hear what God's Spirit is saying to you. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. Here ends the reading of words that give us insight on God. May God grant us wisdom and courage for interpretation.
When I get to heaven, I'm gonna get some new shoes, and I'm gonna walk around.
So for Lent this year, our series has been Disrupted. And as I've told you before, one of the ways that we are being disrupted is we are disrupting my reign on the pulpit. And we have heard from some fantastic preachers, all women. And it has been incredible. And Bishop Flunder, thank you for being at the end of this series to bring us home and to be ready to go into Holy Week starting next Sunday. The Reverend Dr. Yvette Flunder is a San Francisco native and has served her call through prophetic action and ministry for justice for over 30 years. This call to blend proclamation, worship service, and advocacy on behalf of those most marginalized in church and in society led to the founding of the City of Refuge United Church of Christ in 1991. In 2003, the Reverend Dr. Flunder was consecrated as presiding bishop of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, a multi-denominational coalition of over 100 primarily African-American Christian leaders and laity. The Reverend Dr. Flunder is on the board of Star King School for the Ministry and has taught at many theological schools. She's a graduate of the Certificate of Ministry and Master of Arts program at the Pacific School of Religion and received her Doctor of Ministry degree from San Francisco Theological Seminary. She is, as you heard this morning, an award-winning gospel music artist and the author of Where the Edge Gathers, a Theology of Homiletic and Radical Inclusion. Friends, will you please join me in welcoming to the UCC pulpit, Bishop Yvette Flunder. Welcome, Bishop.
Thank you. God bless you. What a joy and privilege it is to see the family and the rest of the family that I did not see last night. I have to offer my deep appreciation to our pastor, Caleb. He's incredible. What a blessing he is. What a blessing. Deep appreciation to Tim and Jaime. I have all sorts of stuff. They gave me a gift bag. And I have stuff, I want you to know, everything from lavender Kleenex to a bottle of good wine and some energy bars. That'll get you anywhere. I'm so grateful that they saw to my having fried chicken and greens and bread last night, and I want them to know I went to the hotel and made fast work of what it was that you did for me. I appreciate RC. It's a great brother, incredible gift. We hold so many things in common. We have some after church talking to do, you and I. Stay salty. You've heard the passage from the book of Matthew today. And let me share a little bit with you. Salt is historically been used mainly to give or enhance flavor in food and as a preservative to prevent corruption and deterioration. Historically, a form of salt that was called natron was used in Egyptian mummification, and it was also harvested from dry lake beds and often used as a cleaning product, both for the home and for the body. When it was blended with oil, it actually was the earliest form of soap. Salt in history has been as valuable as gold, not just for its ability to flavor, But because there were no refrigerators, salt could preserve food from putrefying. To survive long trips and harsh winters and long voyages, food had to be dried and it had to be salted to keep it from spoiling. Salt was and still is used in many communities to preserve. We, who are the followers of God and the disciples of Christ, the disciples of good, if we are true to our calling, we are called to make the earth a purer and more palatable place to live. But we can only do so if we are true to our call. And we honor and we preserve our distinctive characters. In other words, unsalty salt has no value. The writer here in Matthew 5 was likely speaking to a well-known reality of their time. You see, pure salt cannot lose its salinity, its saltiness. But impure salt, such as what forms around the shores of the Dead Sea, gradually becomes unsalty because the sodium chloride in it dissolves. Essentially, the essence of what makes it salt goes away. It loses its potency, and when it loses its potency, it loses its savor, its saltiness, because it is not what it looks like it is. There is salt that looks salty, but it's saltless. It looks like salt, it may even for a season taste like salt, but the shelf life of its saltiness is short. And so in this teaching, Jesus was using an image, a metaphor used by the rabbis of his time. The rabbis commonly used salt as an image for wisdom, which may explain why the Greek word interpreted as lost its savor actually means in the Greek to become foolish and useless. Another way to say it is this: an uninformed disciple has no influence in the world. And perhaps religion has made the church a bit salt challenged. Maybe another way to say it is action challenged. Maybe another way to say it is purpose challenged. How about another way to say it is action challenged? How about that? Perhaps we have a salty look without a salty will. And in my capitalist country, we have abdicated most everything Jesus taught to bolster class and politics. The result of which is we are struggling with the abuse of women. And let me say, because of our active work around this subject, young women, low-income women, and some minority women who are disproportionately victims of domestic violence and rape. In fact, women ages 20 through 24 are at the greatest risk of non-fatal domestic violence. Women aged 24 and under suffer from the highest rates of rape. And the Justice Department estimates that 1 in 5 women will experience rape or attempted rape during their college years in particular. Less than 5% of these will be reported. Income is also a factor. Poorer women. In fact, the poorer the household, the higher the rate of domestic violence. With women in the lowest income factors and the lowest income categories experiencing more than 6 times the rate of non-fatal intimate partner violence as compared to women in higher income categories. And when we consider race, we see that African American women and women of color face higher rates of domestic violence than white women. Native American women are victimized at a rate double that of women of other races. Women who suffer and struggle with very little clarion call and voices from the salty on their behalf. The alienation of the stranger, the absence of hospitality at our borders has been in the news now for days, particularly in a nation where all but the indigenous tribes are immigrants. The true sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was to be inhospitable to strangers. Let's be careful how we entertain strangers. They might well be angels in disguise. The abuse of children in our great country. No child should be hungry. No child should be hungry. Food insecurity impacts 48.8 million Americans, and that includes 13 million children who live in households that lack the means to get enough nutritious food on a regular basis. As a result, they struggle for hunger, and at some time during the year, that happens in many, many families. And I often pray for those who fight so hard for the unborn, that they would concern themselves with the hungry who are born. The abuse of our planet. It troubled me when our country withdrew from the Paris Accords as a blatant disregard of our duty and responsibility to Mother Earth. This planet is our mother, and all living things owe her respect and regard. And it is not just about the calving of ice shelves and the warming that will result in higher sea levels and fresh water and excessive heat that is drying California, which has been on fire way too many times for us to say it's just a natural disaster. We have an obligation to this planet. And everyone who has ever lived on this planet is still here, either in the oxygen or the carbon dioxide. Their nitrogen is in the soil. When we grow our lettuce, we eat our grandparents. You never go away completely and entirely. And so Christ has called us as Christ's disciples, and Christ told them, as Christ tells us, that we should be gatherers of humankind, fishers of men and women. Christ tells us here and tells them further how we should be salt. We should be the salt of the earth. We should be the light of the world. We should be salt and light at the same time. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." This would encourage and support them in their suffering, because in the work of justice and righteousness, you may be treated with contempt. Yet we are called to be blessings of the world. The prophets who went before us were the salt of the land of Canaan, the salt of the lands in England, the salt of the lands in Asia, the salt of the lands in Africa, and the salt of this land. The prophets. But they are to be salt as we are to be salt to the whole world. After Pentecost, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the other parts of the earth, the message was to go ye, and when you get there, be salty. I suspect it was hard to imagine for them because they felt so few and so weak What could they do in so large a province as the whole world? What can we do in so large a province as the whole world? Well, here it is, my beloved. It does not take a whole lot of salt to change flavor. Just a little salt can take bland food to grand food. You see, they did not understand the power of their salt. And I am not sure that we understand the power of our salt. One handful of real salt can completely change the flavor of anything that it touches. Like a little leaven, like a little yeast, can raise a mound of dough. Salty Christians can shift an atmosphere. Salty believers in good God and Spirit can change the world. Salty people full of radical inclusivity, extravagant grace, and relentless hospitality can be the examples of a salty gospel. Salt is penetrating, salt is powerful, it reaches the heart, it is cleansing, it preserves the church from prejudice and institutional putrefaction. I came up with that. The promises of God are called the covenant of salt, and it was required in every single sacrifice. Salt brought flavor, preservation, and life. Salt is in our bodies. In fact, without salt, human life cannot be sustained. Hyponatremia. It's one of those words, kind of Latinish. Hyponatremia. How did I do with that? It's caused by drinking too much water and not getting enough salt in your body. It happens during strenuous exercise without adequate replacement of sodium. Severe hyponatremia, you have to look it up, can lead to coma, and it can be fatal. Gatorade to the rescue. Humankind needs holy Gatorade. Why? Because Gatorade to the rescue, holy Gatorade, gives us the amount of spiritual salt to preserve the body when the body is busy doing its work. Salt is also a remedy for unsavory meat. And what about a remedy, however, for unsavory salt? What do you mean? Salt with no saltiness. It has lost its savor, which means it has lost its relevance, its purpose, its vitality, its vigor, its joy, its exuberance, and its influence. And let me really say this another way. That if we are always comfortable as the body of Christ, we are probably moving toward becoming private social clubs. What does it mean? Because when we've lost our edge, our saltiness, if we are never made uncomfortable in the work we are doing, then we are never being pushed beyond our level of comfortability, which means we're not making change happen in the world. Some of us have taken our signs of protest and put them in our attics, and we have traded in our Birkenstocks. And we have forgotten how to be holy troublemakers. So here is the salt test. If everyone that we worship with is about the same as everyone else, our churches are not salty enough. If we are not weighing in on the tough issues and somehow leaving that up to somebody else, we're not salty enough. if we are silent in the face of injustice, if we're just going along to get along, we are likely not salty enough. If we have decided to leave all of this stuff to the generations that are coming after us, then we are old people who are not salty enough. And you can be salty until the day you die. I know some salty old folks. Listen. You can be salty. And I hear people saying back to me, oh, but I'm tired, oh, but I've already done it, oh, but. There are a lot of ways to be salty. If you cook your famous pie, bring some folks around to talk about the conditions of our world, and put your pie on it. Essentially, that pie becomes a drawing force for conversation, and that conversation then goes out and shifts an atmosphere. When you're working at the gym, when you're riding your bike, when you're at the grocery store, when you're sharing with your grandchildren, when you're playing cards and checkers and dominoes and Candy Crush and Angry Birds, and enter into conversation with others about the conditions of our world. Stay salty in every moment and opportunity that you have on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, email, snail mail, on your porch, during the worship, before and after. Stay salty. An airline security person said it this way: if you see something, say something. To salt others, you must be salty yourself. How will an unjust world be salty if the salted ones lose their saltiness? Say something. Involve yourself in something. Speak truth to power somewhere. Tell the grandchildren what it took for us to get to this place in our freedom. Never think that what is happening to others will not visit your home, will not visit your family, will not visit your neighborhood. The promises of God are called a covenant of salt. Salt was required in every sacrifice, in every holy thing. In the temple, salt was required. The salty ones are the ones who are called of God to bring flavor, to bring preservation, and to bring life. The salty ones were at once called troublemakers, but every prophet was first called a heretic. The salty ones, I admonish you, spread it everywhere. You are the salt of the earth. You are the salt of the disciples of Christ. You are the salt of San Diego. You are the salt of your family. Stay salty. God bless. Thank you. Thank you.
Rejoicing every day. Oh, happy day.